They hollowed me out before they let me serve. That's what sanctioning means in the end. The black ships found me when I was 7 years old, hiding in the underhive of Vortan Prime. I'd made the mistake of saving my sister's life. Pushed a collapsing Habstack beam aside with my mind when the tremors hit. 3 tons of corroded steel, suspended in midair for exactly 4 seconds while she crawled to safety. Long enough for the Arbites to see. Long enough for the Inquisition to be summoned. My mother screamed when they took me. Not from grief, from relief. One less mouth to feed. One less abomination sleeping under her roof. She made the sign of the Acula as the Arbites dragged me away, her lips moving in prayer. I remember looking back at her as they forced me into the transport, searching her face for some hint of love, of regret, of anything human. There was nothing, just fear and gratitude that the taint was being removed from her home. My sister tried to run after me. Little Mira, only 5 years old, screaming my name as she chased the transport down the garbage-strewn street. An Arbites knocked her aside with his shock maul. I watched her fall, watched her cry, watched her reach out toward me with one small hand. That's the last memory I have of her that I'm certain is real. Everything after that moment is suspect, contaminated by 9 years of warp exposure and psychic conditioning. I don't know what's memory and what's wishful thinking anymore. The black ship was called the Contempt of Witches. I remember the smell most of all, ozone and burning hair, mixed with something sweet and wrong, like fruit rotting from the inside. They kept us inside dampening cells, each one lined with hexagrammatic wards that made my teeth ache and my eyes water. The wards were carved deep into the walls, filled with molten lead and blessed silver, each symbol precisely placed to create a web of null space that suppressed our gifts. It hurt to exist in those cells, like having your lungs slowly crushed, or your bones ground to powder 1 millimeter at a time. The pain was constant, inescapable, a low-level agony that made sleep nearly impossible. But sleep was dangerous anyway. Sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant opening doors you couldn't close. 200 children in those cells. We could hear each other through the walls, whimpering, praying, sometimes screaming when the nightmares got too bad. The walls were thin enough to transmit sound, but thick enough to contain psychic energy. A cruel design. They wanted us to know we weren't alone, to hear each other's suffering, but prevented us from reaching out, from comforting each other. Isolation, wrapped in proximity. Another lesson about what we'd become. 63 of us made it to Terra alive. The rest opened doors they couldn't close. I watched a boy named Mikhail claw his own eyes out because he said something was looking back at him from behind them. His screams echoed for hours. The servitors didn't come immediately. I think they let him scream, let us all hear it, as another lesson. When they finally arrived, they disposed of his body with the same mechanical efficiency they used to clean the waste recyclers. I watched a girl named Irina age 50 years in 10 seconds when her gift manifested wrong during a particularly violent warp transition. Her hair turned white. Her skin became parchment. Her eyes filmed over with cataracts. She collapsed into dust while still screaming, her voice getting older, raspier, until it was just a death rattle. I watched a boy dissolve into a puddle of screaming meat, his body losing cohesion, becoming liquid, becoming nothing. The smell was undescribable, like hot copper and spoiled milk and something else, something that made my stomach clench and my mind recoil. No one mourned. Mourning implied waste, and waste implied value. We had no value, not yet. We were ore, unprocessed and potentially worthless. Only those who survived the journey, who proved their souls were strong enough to be shaped, would gain the dubious honor of usefulness. The rest were statistical losses, acceptable casualties in the Imperium's endless war against chaos. The Scholastica Psycana processed us like ore in a refinery. They burned away everything that made us weak: fear, hope, attachment, identity. They poured the Emperor's light into the hollow spaces, searing our souls with his divine radiance, until we could withstand the pressure of our own gifts without shattering. It felt like dying, over and over, for 6 years. The training was methodical, brutal, uncompromising. They taught us to build walls in our minds, fortifications of will and faith that could withstand psychic assault. They taught us to recognize the touch of demons, the subtle wrongness that precedes possession. They taught us the litanies of protection, prayers that became as automatic as breathing, mantras to repeat when the darkness pressed too close. Every day, they pushed us, made us use our gifts under controlled conditions while instructors watched for signs of taint, for the subtle shifts in demeanor that indicated something had slipped through our defenses. Those who showed weakness were taken away. We never saw them again. We learned not to ask what happened to them. I excelled at the training, not because I was stronger than the others, but because I learned to hollow myself out preemptively, to create an inner emptiness that demons couldn't fill because there was nothing there to corrupt. I made myself into a vessel, a hollow shell, and filled it only with the Emperor's light and the mathematics of psychic discipline. It saved my life. It destroyed my soul. The sanctioning ritual itself is difficult to describe. They don't let you remember it clearly, not all of it. Part of the ritual involves psychic conditioning that obscures the memory, leaving only fragments, impressions, emotional scars without clear context. I have fragments, like shards of broken glass embedded in my memory. I remember being strapped to a chair carved from psychically reactive crystal that hummed at frequencies that made my bones vibrate. I remember feeling my mind being opened like a book, every thought, every memory, every secret fear exposed to the pitiless examination of the Ordo Hereticus. Inquisitors and sanctioned psychers more powerful than I could ever hope to be, peeling back the layers of my consciousness, searching for corruption, for weakness, for the subtle touch of the warp's taint. I remember screaming until my throat ruptured. I remember tasting blood. I remember pain that transcended physical sensation, that carved itself into my soul and left marks that will never heal. They found 17 points of potential corruption in my psyche. 17 places where demons might slip in, might whisper, might take root and grow like cancer. Places where my fears, my desires, my memories created vulnerabilities. Each one was a doorway that needed to be sealed, burned, obliterated. They burned them away with consecrated brands that left scars on my soul. Physical brands, too. I have 17 circular scars on my body, arranged in patterns that correspond to the vulnerable points in my psychic architecture. They glow faintly in absolute darkness, luminous with the Emperor's power. I can still feel them sometimes, like phantom limbs, aching spaces where parts of me used to be. One of those 17 points was my memory of my sister. They found it, examined it, determined it was a vulnerability. Love is always a vulnerability, after all. Demons use love as a lever, a way to pry open your defenses. So they burned it. Not completely. That would have been kinder. Instead, they left it there, corroded, unreliable, a memory that shifts and changes every time I examine it. Now I can't trust any memory of her. Can't trust that moment of her reaching for me was real, or if it's something I invented to fill the burned-away space. Can't trust my grief, my guilt, my love, all of it contaminated by the sanctioning process. When they were done, I was sanctioned, purified, safe, useful. They gave me my designation, Epsilon 77 Kappa, and my assignment. I was to serve aboard the Eternal Vigil, a lunar-class cruiser serving in Battlefleet Obscurus. My function, etheric navigator, third choir. My purpose, to extend the ship's psychic awareness into the warp, to sense threats before they manifest, to scream warnings into the minds of the bridge crew when something hungry moves through the immaterium toward our Geller field. I have served for 9 years, 4 months, and 16 days. I am 28 years old. I feel ancient beyond measure. The choir chamber is located deep in the ship's core, surrounded by 17 layers of blessed adamantium and psychically sealed bulkheads. The number 17 isn't coincidence. It corresponds to the sacred geometry of psychic containment, the mathematical precision required to create a stable null space within the ship's superstructure. They keep us here because we're dangerous, not just to ourselves, but to everyone aboard. A Psyker who loses control on a void ship can kill thousands in seconds, turn them inside out, age them to dust, fill their minds with visions that make them claw open the airlocks and walk, laughing, into the void, transform them into things that were never meant to exist in real space. I've heard stories of entire ships lost because a single unsanctioned Psyker manifested at the wrong moment, in the wrong way. So they keep us locked away, like ammunition in a magazine, like promethium in sealed tanks, like any other weapon that might explode if handled carelessly. The bulkheads are blast-rated. The chamber can be sealed from the outside and flooded with psychic null-field radiation that would kill us in seconds, but save the rest of the crew. We know this. They made sure we know this. Our survival is conditional on our utility. The moment we become more dangerous than useful, we're ashes. There are 12 of us in third choir. We sit in restraint thrones arranged in a circle, our heads enclosed in psychoconductive helms that look like crowns of thorns made from brazen wire and sacred circuitry. The helms are connected directly to our nervous systems through neural spikes that pierce the base of our skulls. The pain is constant, a white noise agony you eventually learn to ignore because there's no alternative. Cables run from the helms into the ship's cogitator banks, translating our psychic impressions into data the bridge crew can understand. Our visions, our warnings, our screams, all of it filtered through machines and presented as readable information, clean, sanitized, divorced from the horror of how it's obtained. We never speak to each other, not with words anyway. Speech is forbidden during our shifts, 18 hours on, 6 hours off, every day, for as long as we live. The silence is enforced by neural inhibitors built into our helms. Try to speak, and you get a jolt of pain that makes your vision white out. Try repeatedly, and the inhibitor increases intensity until you lose consciousness. Instead, we brush against each other's minds in the darkness of the warp, sharing fragments of thought, emotions, memories that leak through our carefully maintained barriers. Not intentionally, psychic isolation is part of our training. But after hours of exposure, days, months, years, the barriers erode. You bleed into each other, whether you want to or not. I know Brother Tertius dreams of gardens he's never seen. Vast gardens with flowers in colors that don't exist, under skies of impossible geometries. He walks through them in his sleep, searching for something he can never find. Sometimes I think the gardens are a gift, a refuge his mind created from the horror. Other times I think they're a trap, a beautiful cage that's slowly replacing his memories of reality. Sister Octavia remembers the taste of her mother's cooking, though she can no longer recall her mother's face. She holds on to that memory, fresh bread, some kind of spiced meat, the sweetness of preserved fruit, like a lifeline. I felt her clutch at it during particularly brutal shifts, using it as an anchor when the warp tries to pull her apart. But the memory is fading. Every time she reaches for it, there's a little less detail. Soon there will be nothing left but the ghost of sweetness on a tongue that can no longer taste. Adept Secundus counts prime numbers in his sleep to keep the voices out. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17. He counts faster than humanly possible, his mind racing through sequences, building walls of mathematics against the whispers. It works. Mostly. But sometimes the numbers start to change. The sequences twist. Prime numbers that couldn't possibly exist begin appearing in his count, and he has to start over, has to rebuild his walls from scratch. We're all slowly going mad. It's just a matter of how long we can hold it together before we break. The warp is not empty. That's the first thing they teach you, and the last thing you want to remember. It's full of things, entities, presences, consciousnesses that exist in ways mortal minds weren't meant to comprehend. Some are vast and terrible, gods and monsters whose attention would crack your sanity like an eggshell. Others are small and subtle, parasites that slip into your thoughts and nest there, whispering, changing you from the inside. When we open ourselves to the warp, to extend the ship's senses, we expose ourselves to all of it. Every shift is like standing naked in a storm of razors and screams, holding up a lightning rod and praying the Emperor's light burns bright enough to keep the darkness at bay. We feel everything, the currents of the immaterium, the eddies of psychic energy, the attention of things that hunger. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the things in the warp just watch. That's worse in some ways. You can feel their attention, vast and alien and patient. They don't attack, they don't threaten. They just watch, and you know with absolute certainty that they're waiting for you to tire, for your defenses to slip, for the inevitable moment when you make a mistake. I've lost 3 choir brothers to possession in the time I've served. The first was Brother Quintus, who started laughing during a routine warp translation and couldn't stop. His laughter got higher, shriller, until it didn't sound human anymore, until it sounded like breaking glass and burning hair and the screams of something dying in ways that shouldn't be possible. Blood started running from his eyes, thick and dark, steaming in the cold air of the choir chamber. His helm began to glow, cherry red with psychic heat, the metal warping, the circuitry melting. The neural spikes in his skull began to burn, cooking his brain from the inside. The smell was indescribable. The kill servitors activated before anyone could react. They're programmed to respond to specific psychic signatures, to the telltale energy patterns of possession. They pumped bolt rounds into his throne until nothing remained but smoking meat and shattered bone and melted metal. The throne itself was destroyed, replaced the next day with an identical unit. Brother Quintus was replaced within 6 hours. The Imperium has an endless supply of sanctioned Psykers. We are legion. We are expendable. The second was Sister Nona, who opened her eyes one day and they weren't her eyes anymore. They were windows into somewhere else, somewhere writhing and infinite and absolutely wrong. The whites had turned black. The irises had become spirals that rotated continuously, drawing your gaze in, making you want to fall into them and never stop falling. She spoke in 17 voices simultaneously, each one promising different things: salvation, damnation, transformation, knowledge, power, oblivion. The voices harmonized impossibly, creating sounds that human vocal cords couldn't produce, frequencies that made your teeth vibrate and your bones ache, and your thoughts blur into confusion. The choir master activated her throne's null field, and she simply stopped. Not dead, not alive, just gone, her body left behind like discarded clothing. The body remained breathing, heart beating, but empty. They kept it on life support for 3 days, hoping she might return. She didn't. Eventually they terminated the functions and incinerated the remains. No one knows where Sister Nona went. If she's still conscious somewhere in the warp, if she's been consumed, if she's been transformed into something else. We don't talk about it. But sometimes, during deep warp transits, I think I hear her voice among the others, still speaking in that 17-fold harmony. The third was yesterday. Adept Primus was our senior, our anchor, the strongest of us. 40 years he'd served in the choir, longer than most Psykers survive. He was a legend among us. Not that we could speak of it, but we all knew. 40 years of daily exposure to the warp, 40 years of holding the line, 40 years of service without breaking. He'd taught me techniques for shielding my mind, for recognizing the subtle signs of psychic infiltration, for holding on to my humanity when the warp tried to strip it away. Not through speech, that was forbidden, but through the gentle touch of his mind against mine during shifts, sharing knowledge through pure thought, pure experience. He taught me how to build a mental fortress, layer by layer, each wall constructed from faith and mathematics and sheer stubborn will. He taught me how to recognize the touch of demons, not the obvious assaults, but the subtle insinuations, the thoughts that seem like your own but aren't, the memories that feel real but are manufactured. He taught me how to hold on to one true memory, one absolutely certain thing about yourself, and use it as an anchor. For him it was his daughter's laugh. He'd heard it once, 41 years ago, before the black ships took him. Just once. But he'd wrapped that memory in adamantium, protected it with everything he had, kept it pure and uncorrupted through 4 decades of horror. Yesterday, during our shift, he touched my mind in the darkness. Not threatening, gentle, almost apologetic, and I felt something I'd never felt from him before. Relief. I'm tired, little brother. His thought whispered into my consciousness. The words weren't words exactly, more like pure meaning, pure emotion, transmitted directly. So tired. And I'm not as strong as I was. Something got in. Weeks ago, maybe months. I can feel it growing. I tried to send comfort, reassurance, but he pushed it away with surprising strength. Don't tell them yet. Let me have this last shift in peace. Let me feel the stars one more time. Let me remember what it felt like to serve with purpose, before it takes everything. I should have reported it immediately. It's my duty. The safety of the ship, the lives of 8,000 crew members. Everything depends on choir psychers reporting signs of corruption immediately. But I didn't. I let him have his peace. I let him have his final hours of service. I've been asking myself why. Was it compassion, cowardice, some subtle psychic influence making me hesitate? I still don't know. 2 hours into the shift, Adept Primus began to scream. Not with his voice. He never broke protocol, even at the end. He screamed psychically, a shriek of such pure agony and terror that it knocked 3 of us unconscious instantly and ruptured Sister Octavia's nose with a gout of blood. The psychic pressure was immense, overwhelming, a tsunami of pain and fear and realization. His body convulsed in the throne, every muscle locked tight, his fingers clawing at the armrests, hard enough to leave gouges in the blessed steel. Cables tore free from their sockets. His helm began to crack, spiderweb fractures spreading across the psychoconductive metal. And then I felt it, through our psychic connection, through the resonance we all shared in the choir. I felt what he felt. Something was eating him from the inside. Not his body, his soul, consuming him piece by piece, memory by memory, emotion by emotion, devouring everything that made him human and replacing it with something else. Something that wore his face like a mask and looked out through his eyes with hunger that could never be satisfied. I felt his memories being consumed, his daughter's laugh, the anchor he'd protected for 40 years, dissolved like sugar in acid. I felt his horror as it disappeared, felt him reaching for it desperately, only to grasp nothing. Then his name, his real name, gone, his face, forgotten, his purpose, consumed, everything that made him Adept Primus, everything he'd been, erased and replaced with alien hunger. The thing inhabiting him turned its attention to the rest of us. I felt it probe at my defenses, searching for weakness, searching for a way in. It was patient, intelligent. This wasn't mindless corruption. This was predation, precise and calculated. The choirmaster activated his throne's termination sequence. The psycho-reactive collar around Adept Primus's neck ignited with white-hot, sanctified fire, severing his head from his body in a burst of blessed flame that filled the chamber with the smell of burning flesh and consecrated oils. His body slumped in the throne. His head rolled across the floor, trailing smoke and the smell of burning meat. His psychic presence lingered for exactly 4 seconds, long enough for me to hear his final thought, clear and terrible. It's still here. It's in the ship now, in the walls, in the circuits. It's been here for months. It's not just me. It's... Then silence, complete and absolute. The kind of silence that rings in your ears, that makes you doubt whether sound ever existed at all. They replaced him this morning. A girl who looks about 16, her head freshly shaved, her sanctioning scars still raw and weeping. Designation, Epsilon 92. Theta. She sits in Primus's throne now. They cleaned it, replaced the damaged components, but the metal still bears the scorch marks from his termination. Trembling, her eyes wide with fear and awe, and the terrible knowledge of what she's become. I want to tell her it gets easier, that the fear fades, that service in the Emperor's name brings meaning to our sacrifice. But I can't lie to her. Not about this. Even if I could speak, even if the neural inhibitor allowed it, I couldn't lie about this. It doesn't get easier. The fear never fades. And meaning is a luxury for those who still have souls intact enough to comprehend it. I'm writing this during my rest period, in the tiny cell they've assigned me. It's 3 meters by 2 meters, containing a cot that's more like a shelf. a wash basin with perpetually cold water, and a shrine to the Emperor that I'm required to pray at for 2 hours each day. The walls are carved with prayers I can no longer read. My eyes see the words, but my mind can't process their meaning anymore. Another side effect of prolonged warp exposure. Language becomes slippery, unreliable. Words lose their definitions and start to mean other things. Sometimes I pray anyway, forming the words without understanding them, hoping the intention is enough. Sometimes I forget my name, not my designation, that's burned into me deeper than memory, carved into my nervous system through years of conditioning. But my real name, the one my mother gave me before the black ships came. I know it started with Day, or maybe Pem. The memory shifts every time I reach for it, like trying to grab smoke. Was it Alexis? Marcus? Amadeus? Each name feels equally plausible and equally false. I'm forgetting what my sister looked like. The sister I saved. The reason I'm here. I remember she had dark hair, I think. Or was it light? Brown eyes. Blue. She laughed a lot, or was she always serious? Was she younger than me? Or older? The details blur together, dissolving like sugar in water, until I can't trust any of it. Sometimes I wonder if I ever had a sister, if that memory is even real, or if it's something they implanted during the sanctioning to give me motivation, a false anchor to keep me human. The uncertainty is worse than knowing would be. I'm forgetting what it feels like to be warm. The choir chamber is kept cold. Psychic activity generates heat, so they keep us at near-freezing temperatures to prevent our thrones from overheating. But it's more than that. The cold seeps into your bones, into your soul, until you can't remember what warmth felt like, until you can't imagine it anymore, until the concept of warmth becomes abstract, theoretical, something other people experience but not you. I'm forgetting what it means to be human. That's the real horror of what we are, what we do. It's not the demons, not the possession, not even the madness. It's the slow erosion of everything that makes you a person, grain by grain, memory by memory, feeling by feeling, until all that's left is function, purpose, duty, until you're not a person anymore. You're a tool, a weapon, a biological component in a vast machine that doesn't care if you suffer, as long as you work. The Imperium needs Psykers. Without us, there is no Astronomicon to guide ships through the warp, no astropathic communication across the stars, no way to detect psychic threats before they manifest, no ability to navigate the immaterium safely. We are absolutely essential to humanity's survival, and we are absolutely expendable. 10,000 Psykers die every day to keep the Emperor's light burning on Terra. They sit in the Golden Throne's machinery, their souls consumed like fuel, burning away to nothing so that the Astronomicon can shine. 10,000 every day for 10,000 years. The mathematics are staggering. The sacrifice is incomprehensible. Tens of thousands more serve in ways that destroy them slowly, degree by degree, until there's nothing left but ash. We are fuel. We are ammunition. We are sacrifices on an altar so vast that our individual deaths don't even register. We are numbers in a ledger, statistics in a report, acceptable losses in an equation that balances human suffering against species survival. My mother was right to be relieved when they took me. What I am now is worse than death. I'm a ghost, wearing human skin, going through motions that stopped having meaning years ago, holding on to a purpose that was never really mine. I'm a tool that thinks, a weapon that feels, a sacrifice that's taking too long to die. But I do it anyway, because what else is there? I can feel it happening to me. The same thing that happened to Adept Primus. Something scratching at the edges of my mind, testing my defenses, looking for weakness. It's patient. It has eternity. It doesn't need to rush. It can wait for me to tire, to make a single mistake, to let my guard down for just a moment. And I will. Eventually. We all do. The barriers we build in our minds aren't perfect. They can't be. Every time we open ourselves to the warp, every time we extend the ship's senses, we create tiny fractures in our defenses, microscopic cracks that widen with each exposure. We patch them, reinforce them, but the damage accumulates. It's not a matter of if we break, but when. Maybe tomorrow, maybe in 5 years. But eventually I will break. My defenses will fail. Something will slip through those accumulated cracks, and I will become like Primus, a shell filled with something else, something hungry and wrong, wearing my face and speaking with my voice until someone puts me down like a rabid dog. Or maybe I'll simply burn out, overextend myself during a crisis, push my gift too far, trying to save the ship, and dissolve into psychic white noise. They'll scrape what's left out of my throne and incinerate it in the ship's plasma reactors, then assign someone else my designation. Epsilon 77 Kappa will continue to serve, even if I don't. The designation will outlive me. That's the only immortality I'll ever have. The girl who replaced Primus, Epsilon 92 Theta. I caught her looking at me during today's shift. Even through the helms, even through the neural inhibitors and psychic dampers, I could feel her terror, her desperate hope that one of us older choir members would reassure her, would tell her it's going to be all right, that we'd welcome her, comfort her, tell her she'd made it, she'd survived the worst. I looked away, because it's not going to be all right. It's never going to be all right. We're all dying here, degree by degree, and the only variable is how long we can pretend otherwise. And the worst part, she's already starting to understand that. I felt it in her mind. The first stirrings of realization, the first cracks in the comfortable lies they told her during training. The warp is howling tonight. I can hear it even through the psi dampeners, even through the 17 layers of blessed adamantium. It sounds like singing, like screaming, like laughter, like all three at once, harmonizing in ways that make my teeth vibrate and my bones ache, and my thoughts scatter like disturbed birds. Sometimes I think I can make out words in the howling. Sometimes I think I hear my name, my real name, not my designation, called from vast distances. Sometimes I think I hear my sister's voice, grown up now, calling for me, asking why I never came home. I know it's not real. I know it's just the warp, just entities trying to lure me into lowering my defenses. But knowing doesn't stop the longing, the desperate desire to believe that somewhere, someone still remembers me as something other than Epsilon 77 Kappa. In 3 hours, my rest period ends. I'll return to my throne, don my helm, and open my mind to the infinite darkness once again. I'll extend the ship's senses into madness and horror, searching for threats, screaming warnings, holding the line between reality and the things that want to devour it. And I'll do it the next day, and the day after that, until I break, until I burn out, until something takes me, and I become another name forgotten, another designation reassigned, another sacrifice consumed by the machinery of humanity's survival. They hollowed me out before they let me serve. I just didn't realize they'd keep hollowing me out, day after day, shift after shift, scraping away everything I was until nothing remains but an empty space where a person used to be, until the hollow becomes so complete that I can't remember what it felt like to be full. Sometimes, in the darkness between shifts, in those brief moments before exhaustion drags me into dreamless sleep, I wonder if this is what the Emperor wants, if this suffering, this slow dissolution of self, is part of some grand design I'm too small to comprehend, if my pain has meaning beyond just function, if there's purpose in this sacrifice beyond mere utility. But then I remember, the Emperor can't hear me. He's too busy dying on the golden throne, too busy burning through 10,000 Psykers a day just to keep the Astronomicon lit, too busy holding back the tide of chaos to notice one more voice in the infinite chorus of the suffering. And even if he could hear me, what would I say? Thank you, I understand. This is necessary. I don't understand. I never will. All I know is that I'm here, and I'm hollow, and I'm dying by degrees, and somewhere in the machinery of the Imperium, someone has decided that this is acceptable, that my suffering, multiplied by millions across the galaxy, is the price humanity pays for survival. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is necessary. Maybe without us, without our sacrifice, humanity would fall to chaos and extinction. Maybe every moment of agony, every lost memory, every piece of ourselves that gets carved away serves a greater purpose. Or maybe we're just fuel. Maybe there's no grand meaning, no cosmic purpose. Maybe we're just burning so that others don't have to. And the only meaning is the meaning we create for ourselves in the moments between shifts. I choose to believe there's purpose, not because I've found evidence of it, but because the alternative, that all of this suffering is meaningless, would destroy what little remains of me. So I choose faith, even though my faith is hollow, even though I can't feel the Emperor's light anymore, even though every prayer feels like screaming into a void. I choose to believe because the alternative is worse. I am Epsilon 77 Kappa. I was human once. I remember almost nothing of what that meant. And in the cold mathematics of the Imperium survival, that's exactly how it should be. Tomorrow I'll put on my helm again. I'll open my mind to horrors that would drive normal humans insane in seconds. I'll hold the line, just like I did yesterday, just like I'll do every day until I can't anymore. And when I finally break, when something finally slips through my defenses or I burn out trying to save the ship, someone else will take my designation. Another Psyker will sit in my throne, wear my helm, take up my burden. The choir will continue, the ship will sail on, the Imperium will endure, and I will be forgotten. Just another sacrifice in an endless war, just another name that no one remembers, just another hollow space where a person used to be. That's what it means to be a Psyker in the Imperium of Man. That's what it means to serve. That's what it means to be sanctioned, purified, useful. That's what it means to be fuel. In the grim darkness of the far future, humanity's salvation requires the sacrifice of humanity itself.